Okay, good morning. We're going to start today. Today we're going to be discussing Lecture 8, which is the lecture that is discussing writing the report. So we're going to be moving through Lecture 8 and just talking about the project and the report for the project and what's expected. Just want to remind you guys that homework 7 and quiz 7 is due by the end of the day today, as well as the journal entry. And then by the end of the day tomorrow, homework 8, quiz 8. Okay, so I know that lecture 6 and 7 was pretty heavy, lots and lots of material, lots and lots of pretty complex concepts. So I want to encourage you to make sure that you are prepared before you get on to take the quizzes and the homework. So that means rewatch the lecture, review the lecture notes, watch the videos that I've posted, the extra videos, read the book if you have it, reach out to me. If you're still struggling with the concept, reach out to me. Let's talk about it. Let me go over it with you, okay? Because you're going to see these concepts on the final, and you're going to need to be able to understand that what correlation is. You know, that it's a relationship between two variables that falls between -1 and 1. 0 means there's no relationship. The closer you are to 1 or -1 means there's a higher relationship, either direct if it's positive or indirect if it's negative. And you need to be able to look at outputs of that Spearman-R. And remember, correlation, regression, t-test, ANOVA, those are inferential tests. I just kind of looked through your discussions for this week, and some of you are still not super clear on the difference between descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. So remember, descriptive statistics, that's just describing the group, the sample, mean, median, mode, standard deviation. Those are descriptive statistics. They just describe the group, okay? Inferential statistics are when you run an inferential test, like a correlation or a regression or a t-test or an ANOVA. Those are inferential tests. When you run those, you get inferential statistics, the Spearman-R for correlation, the F ratio for regression, the t-value for t-test, and the F ratio for ANOVA. Those are your inferential statistics. Those are used to generate probabilities, okay? Probabilities that two things are related statistically in the case of correlation and regression, or in the case of the t-value and the F ratio in t-tests and ANOVA, it's looking for differences. In t-tests, do two variables differ statistically? So they generate, the computer generates that t-value. That's an inferential statistic. And then we can say with 95% confidence or 99% confidence that yes, these two are different if the probability is less than 0.05%, less than 5%, okay? So if it's less than 0.05 or less than 5%, then there's a difference. Those two values are different. That is an inferential test with an inferential statistic that we can actually make a decision based on. If I just look at two descriptive statistics, if I just look at two means, I could say, well, maybe they're different, but I can't say they're statistically different with confidence until I run the statistical inferential test. I have to run that inferential test for me to say, I'm 95% confident that these are different, or I'm confident these are not different because the p-value was not less than 0.05. It was not less than 5%. So I can be pretty confident that these two groups, even though they might not be exactly the same, I can be confident with that inferential test that they're not different if the p-value doesn't fall below 0.05. Okay, so the only way to make a decision with the probability is to run an inferential test, a correlation, a regression, a t-test, or an ANOVA. If you don't run that test, you've got some nice descriptive statistics, and that's good, but you can't make any decisions based on it. All it's doing is giving you information. Okay, no decisions can be made on that, saying whether something's related with correlation and regression or saying something's different with t-test and ANOVA. Okay, so the only way to be able to make a decision about whether something's related, whether two variables are related, whether you can predict with regression, or whether there's differences, is to run the inferential tests and get the inferential statistics. So like as we do our project, you have to run an inferential test. If you just run some descriptive statistics, that's nice. It tells us about that group that we're getting data from. It just gives us some descriptions. Okay, you've got to run an inferential test in order for us to really understand any of the relationships or differences. Okay, so in the past, there's been times when I've had people turn their report in and all they did was just get the means. And they're like, yeah, here's the means on the two groups. That's wonderful, that's part of it, but that's not you can't answer a hypothesis with descriptive statistics. You just can't. I mean, you could say, well, that mean was higher than the other mean. Yeah, but do we know if it's statistically higher? We don't know if it's statistically higher at the 95% confidence until we run an inferential test, a correlation, a regression, a t-test, or an ANOVA. So in your project, you will be running one of those tests, okay? So if you're still really struggling with that, you got to go back. Like if you're, I noticed that on the homework scores on homework 6, they were pretty dismal. I did go over homework 6 in one of the lectures. I think it might have been either on Monday or Tuesday of this week. At the very end, I reviewed it. I pulled the homework up, the actual homework. I went through and did the analysis and we answered the questions. So if you weren't here for that, I highly encourage you to go back and look at that, because I think only 1 or 2 people did okay on that quiz. Everybody else really did poorly on it. I mean, not the quiz, the homework. Everybody else did really poorly on homework 6. So if you did poorly on homework 6, go back and watch the review. If you're still confused about why that's the right answer, like you might see it and go like, oh, okay, now I see. If you're still feeling confused, go back, rewatch the lecture on homework, on lecture 6. Email me, see if we can do a quick Zoom session and we can talk about it. I can answer your questions. Okay, that's the only way you're going to have understanding, is if you keep going back and reviewing and redoing and practicing and doing the practice homework. Go back and look at those things, okay? Because if you just kind of go like, oh, well, I didn't do well, I'm just going to blow that off, it's going to bite you again at the final, right? Because you've still got to take the final. And there's going to be questions on there about correlation. So for correlation, you're going to be running that inferential test to get the Spearman R. Okay, that's the inferential statistic. When I run the correlation in Excel with the data function, then I get that output and it gives me an R value. That's the Spearman R. That's my inferential statistic. Okay, I have to understand that. Is it direct or indirect? You know, is it high enough for me to run a regression? If you run the regression, how do I tell whether it's a statistically significant relationship? Where do I find the slope? Where do I find the intercept? How do I make a line of best fit? Y equals mx plus b. What is y? What is x? You know, what do those things even mean? On the mx, what's m? You know, m's the slope. What's b? B's the intercept. So you have to know all that stuff, okay? And go back in and practice it. You know, go back and do the practice homework if you're still feeling confused on that correlation and regression. You know, and remember, correlation and regression, those things are used for descriptive research. Those inferential tests are used to only look at relationships and prediction. That's what they're used for. And they're used for descriptive research. Okay. Where t-test and ANOVA, those things are used to look at differences. Those inferential tests, t-test and ANOVA, those inferential tests are looked to see if there's differences between two groups in the t-test or between three or more in the ANOVA. Okay, so if you're still struggling with that, please, 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 I'm imploring upon you to go back, rewatch lectures, read back through with your book in the lecture outlines and your notes. Watch those videos that I posted. Contact me, okay? Because you still have those 2 homeworks left to do. And I'm probably going to do an extra credit homework with some correlation, regression, t-test, and ANOVA stuff on it. I think I'm going to do that just to give you guys another shot, another practice. It'll give you another, I'll allow that to replace one of your other homeworks. So that's how I'm going to do the extra credit. So I'm going to do 1 extra credit homework. It's going to allow you, like if you score higher than one of your other homeworks, it'll just knock that other homework out. Okay. So I'm gonna put up a homework 8 that'll be due probably maybe Monday or Tuesday of next week. Okay. But I'm gonna try to get it up for the weekend. I'm also gonna try to get the final up for the weekend. If some of you are really studying this weekend and you feel like, hey, I'm ready to just get that final done. I want you to have that opportunity to go for it. But the final won't actually be due until the end of next week if you just need more time to study. So that's kind of where we're at. So as a reminder, homework 7, quiz 7 due by the end of today, plus the journal entry, okay? Homework 8, quiz 8 due by the end of the day on Friday, okay? Oh, the extra credit for the midterm. I haven't seen that any of you have done that yet. The extra credit for the midterm, it is located under quizzes and exams on the left navigation bar. Courtney.
It's not open. I tried doing it, but
Oh, you're kidding me. Thank you
No.
for letting me know.
You're welcome.
So let me make sure that's open.
I was curious if it was something we could do, so I kind of just left it alone because I thought maybe it was just an extra tab, but that makes sense now.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize that it wasn't open. I thought I had it open. So let me go. I'm going in there right now to do it so I don't forget. So it's under exams. That's really weird. I see that it's open. Can you guys check to see if you go on the left navigation bar, go to quizzes and exams, click in there, and then click in exam, and you should see the midterm extra credit exam questions.
I can see it. I can do it.
Yeah, and Courtney, I just opened it yesterday, so can you check to see if you can see it now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, perfect. So if you go in there, what that's asking you to do is I give you all the midterm scores for our class. Okay, so there's 9 scores, there's 9 students in this class. So you'll get all these were the scores of the students, okay? So you're gonna put those in Excel. So just make a little database for yourself, get Excel up, put the scores in, okay? Then you're gonna run descriptive statistics on that. So you can see what the mean, median, mode, standard deviation is, okay? Then, and that's one of the questions, what's the mean, median, mode of the data and standard deviation of the data? Okay, the next question, you're going to be taking, it asks you to take your raw score, so what you earned on the midterm, and you want to determine what your z-score is. So you'll take your score, you'll subtract the mean, and you'll divide by the standard deviation. That'll give you your z-score, okay? So your z-score will fall in the z distribution for the normal curve. Remember the z distribution, mean of 0, standard deviation of 1. So you'll find your z-score, you'll put it on the z distribution, and then you'll tell me what your percentile is. So that means you've got to go to the link for a z table, or you can just go onto Google and say, show me a z table. Okay, and there's tons of them out there. You'll find your percentile. So you'll go to a z table. So look for if you have a negative z-score, look for a negative z table, and then you can find your percentile on there. If your z-score is positive, find a positive z table. I have sent you guys the link, so you guys have that. I've sent it in. If you go to announcements, you'll see on one of the emails there's a link to a table, but you can easily Google it. So then you'll find your percentile. So what's your percentile for the midterm in this class? Okay. Then I ask, what is the range of values for 95% confidence? So all you have to do for that is take the mean, and then you're going to the mean plus or minus the standard deviation times 2. That's your range. So you have to tell me the actual scores, range of scores, okay? And then you need to give me an example of what score would fall outside the 95% confidence interval, where you could say, this is a different score from the class. So you just need to give me an example of a score that fell outside that 95%. So if you get all 4 of those questions right, you'll get 2 extra points on your midterm. Okay, so it just gives you another shot at applying the normal curve stuff and the 95% confidence, and how do you determine if something's different, that kind of thing. Okay, so that needs to be done by Sunday. Okay, so I've sent you guys all emails with that information on it. And I think I even have due dates on all of those in Blackboard. Okay. So any questions about where we're at with when things are due, what you need to do by the end of the weekend to get all your quizzes, all your homeworks done. So by the end of the weekend, you should have all your quizzes and all your homeworks done. Rachel.
And homework 8 gonna open today?
Homework 8 is open already. So
Okay.
I've opened homework 8 and quiz 8 already. They're due by the end of the day tomorrow.
Okay, and then for the paper, are we planning on getting all the data back and starting to analyze that on Monday?
So
Okay.
when we meet on Monday, I will have the data for you guys on. So Monday morning, I'll just close the survey, and I'll download the data and get it cleaned and get it arranged for you guys. So on Monday, we're going to actually talk about, so today we're just going to go through that lecture on what I'm expecting for the report. On Monday, we'll actually go through and talk about, and I might talk about it a little bit today. The lecture's pretty short, but so I may talk about it at the end of the lecture, like what are some possible hypotheses you might make? So you guys could even start working on your paper this weekend if you wanted to. You could start getting the introduction done. You could get the methodology done, because we've already gone through our methods. We're already collecting data. So you could kind of get that intro and methods done. And then on Monday, we're going to talk about some possible hypothesis and like what stats would you run on that? So if you did this hypothesis, what kind of inferential test would you use? You know, so there's going to be quite a number of different hypotheses that people could lay out because we've got quite a number of different data that we're collecting. So we've got, you know, we've got the sexual permissiveness, we've got the we've got the sexual permissiveness, and then we've got the what is it? The birth control condom use. We've got those two scales, and then we've got the did you have sexuality education, right? So we've got several things we can use to compare, several ways we can divide that up. So we could be looking for similarities if we were just doing some descriptive research. So we could do, you know, people could run some correlations or they can run some regressions. Or people could divide the population up and decide they want to look at differences. Like, are there differences between men and women on their sexual permissiveness? Or is there a difference between men and women on their attitudes towards condom and barrier protection? You could look at the difference between people that got sexuality education and didn't get sexuality education. Okay, so if we just had two groups, they got sexuality education, they didn't get sexuality education, then we can run a t-test, right? Make sense? Okay. We could, and there are some ways we could run ANOVAs too, you know, if people felt confident enough to run an ANOVA. The problem is we don't have any way to do a post hoc. So, but someone could run an ANOVA and say, hey, there's a difference in here somewhere, right? Okay. Okay. So, and then so we'll have the data on Monday, and then we'll kind of go over that. And then I'm going to give you Tuesday and Wednesday to just work on your paper. I'll be available for questions. We're not going to actually have any kind of formal meeting time on Tuesday and Wednesday next week, because you just need to work on your paper and get that done. Okay. And study for your final, that kind of thing. We'll have a meeting on Thursday. I'll probably wrap things up, maybe answer more questions about the final, maybe go over some concepts. And that'll be it. And then the paper's due next Thursday. Okay. So that's kind of how we're going to finish out the semester. Okay. Any questions about any of that before I open the lecture on how to do the lab report? Okay. Seeing no questions, I'm going to go ahead and open up the lecture for how we're doing, for how we're going to lay out the project. Okay. Okay, so let me share that. Okay, so lecture 8 is on writing the research paper. Okay, so most of you have probably written a research paper before, a research lab report. I know a lot of you have actually were in personal health, so you did lab reports. So, but lab reports are pretty much the same when you're using the scientific method. So when you're reading an article that somebody did a research report, you're going to see the same type of outline. Okay, so this is a very common outline for writing a research abstract in a paper. Okay, so the abstract format, this is going to be more of a it's going to be more of a lab report. So it'll probably be 2 to 3 pages long. Okay, so what you're going to be doing is you're going to the first thing that we always think about when we're writing a research-based report that's based on, you know, kind of that scientific method where we're laying out a hypothesis and we're testing the hypothesis, is that the title is really, really important. Okay, so in the title, and you'll get points. I'm going to show you the rubric here in a second, but there's points on the title. So your title is very important. So in your title, you need to have the variables you used and your population. So it's very important. So if you were going to do a correlation, you would have to have both of the variables in there in the title and the population. Okay. If you're going to run a multiple regression, you would want to have all of the different variables you use. Or if you were going to do an ANOVA, you would want to have all of the variables you used. If you're going to run a t-test, you want to have the 2 variables you're using. Okay, so you've got to have those variables in the title. And then our population are just adults between the ages of 18 and 30 in, I don't even know if we can say Pueblo, Colorado, because if you sent them out to all your contacts, there might be people from other places. So we're just going to say young adults between the ages of 18 and 30. That's our population. Okay. And then you would also have your variables. So I give you an example. The example might be the effect of creatine on 1 rep max bench press performance following strength training in college football players. Okay, so that is a very typical example of a title for experimental or pseudo-experimental study. Okay. For something that's more descriptive, it might say, you know, we might have a hypothesis that would say something like the relationship between age and sexual permissiveness in young adults between the ages of 18 and 30. Okay. So, yeah. Okay, makes sense? So you've got to have a good title. And we can talk about, as we talk about some of the hypotheses, this will really help you to see how you do your title, because your title is going to be very related to your hypothesis. It's going to have the same variables in it. It's going to also have your population in it. So the hypothesis is very similar to the title of your report. Okay. So then we've got an introduction. So in the introduction, we're going to state the purpose of the research. So we're going to say this is a research question. So you might be looking for relationships, or you might be looking to predict something. So maybe you want to predict whether there's sexual permissiveness. And so could you predict that by, you know, the other variables? Okay. So, or you might want to see if there's a difference between these, you know, these groups. Okay. So we would state what the purpose is. So an example might be the purposes of this study was to determine the effect of creatine on the development of muscle strength in college football players. You know, the purpose of this study was to determine the effect of formal sexuality education on people's attitudes towards birth control and barrier protection. Okay, so you would just state what the purpose is. What's the purpose? Based on what data you're going to be testing. Okay, so you would state what the purpose is, and once you state what the purpose is, then you need to talk a little bit about that in your introduction. Okay, so you would, like, if your purpose is to state the effect of sexuality education on sexual permissiveness. Okay, so then you would talk a little bit about what is formal sexuality education. And you could, and you know, we have research on that because all of you did research, and you are putting those links on the project discussion. Okay, so there's a discussion board for the project. You should be putting your research on there. Okay, so then you should be able to say a few sentences about what what is comprehensive sexuality education, because that's what we said in our survey, that people receive comprehensive sexuality education, healthy, comprehensive. So it wasn't abstinence only education, you know, it wasn't any education that was kind of skewed in a way and didn't give full information. Okay, but there's like tons of research out there, tons of websites that are like from Health and Human Services or from the CDC, or you know, from these organizations where you can get really valuable information. There's tons of articles. So we're going to talk about what is comprehensive sexuality education, if that's one of your variables you choose to use. Okay, so what is that, right? So you're going to talk about that a little bit in your introduction. Okay, if you use another variable, you know, if you're going to use the sexual permissiveness scale, you would talk about that brief sexual attitudes inventory. Okay, I talked to you guys about that. And I even sent you the link for it, but there are articles on that. There are journal articles that talk about that brief sexual attitudes inventory. So you could cite one of the articles just saying, oh yeah, here we use this. Okay, so in the introduction, you're going to have a few sentences about what's the purpose of the research, and then you're going to talk a little bit about the variables and maybe do some citations there. Okay, so cite some of those articles in there. So your introduction might be, you know, 3/4 of a page, something like that, where you're going to talk about the study that we're doing, and the tools we're using to collect data, and just the concepts of the variables. Okay, and then at the end of the introduction, we want to do a hypothesis. Okay, so that's where you state your hypothesis. Okay, so the hypothesis is that there's a relationship between maybe we could say there's a negative indirect relationship between sexual permissiveness and attitudes towards sexual permissiveness and attitudes towards birth control and barrier protection. So maybe, I don't know, as people are more permissive, do they use less barrier protection? Or do they use more? So when people are more permissive, do they tend to use condoms or barrier protection more? That'd be interesting to know. And actually some studies do show that as people are more permissive and they have more sexual partners, they do tend to use more barrier contraception versus if somebody's in a monogamous relationship and they have one partner. But it might be interesting to look at that based on people's attitudes. You know, so I might state my hypothesis that the hypothesis is that there'll be a direct relationship between sexual permissiveness and the use of barrier birth control and protection. Who knows? Okay, it'd be interesting to see what the outcome of that is. And could we predict, you know, how often somebody would use, you know, could we predict the use of barrier protection and contraception by knowing how permissive somebody is? I don't know. You know, those are some variables we could look at. But we would provide our hypothesis here, or we might say, you know, I think men have a more permissive sexual attitude than women, or vice versa. I think women have a more permissive attitude towards sex than men. And I could test that. I could divide them up into men and women, and then I could do an independent t-test, since it's men and women, 2 groups, and 1 measure, sexual permissiveness. Okay, and I could test that. Okay, so, but I've got to provide my hypothesis here at the end of the introductory section. Okay, then in the methods, I'm going to describe the basic procedures that were used. Okay, so what did we do here? Okay, so what did we do? Well, we did a survey with young adults between the ages of 18 and 30. Okay, so you would describe that. You would write this so someone could duplicate the research. Okay, so we used the brief sexual attitudes survey, or I think it was survey. So it was brief BSAS. I think that's what it is. So we used that survey, and we used 2 of the scales on that survey. We used the sexual permissiveness scale, and we used the birth control scale. Okay, so you would say that. We also asked their age, their gender, and whether they had had sexuality education or not, and then whether they felt like they had a good level of education. Okay, around sexuality. Okay, so we would write that up. We would write the survey, that we did this survey, that it was put on SurveyMonkey, and that the URL was sent out to convenient sample populations. It was sent out to young adults. So we would say that this was a convenient sample. It was not a random sample. This was a convenient sample. We sent the link out to young adult populations and asked them to complete the 3 to 5 minute survey. Okay, so those are our basic procedures. That's what we did. And then we would, at the very end, we would describe the analysis. What inferential statistic are we going to use to test our hypothesis? Okay, so if my hypothesis is, I think there's a relationship between sexual permissiveness and the use of barrier contraception, then I would be doing a correlation, and maybe I would run a regression and do a regression equation. Okay, so I would say that in my methods section, that a correlation test will be run, and a regression equation will be determined if the correlation is appropriate or high enough. Okay, if I was going to see if there's a difference between men and women, or a difference between those that got sexuality education versus those that didn't get sexuality education, then I would say I was going to run a t-test. Okay, so if it was either men or women, or those that got sexuality education versus those that didn't get sexuality education, those are both independent t-tests, 2 separate groups. Okay, we didn't do a pre-test and a post-test. So there's nothing we manipulated. So there's not going to be any within measure. Okay, we didn't do a within measure. Okay, so these are going to be, as we divide by gender, or we divide by those that feel like that they're knowledgeable, or those that actually got education, then those are independent t-tests, 2 separate groups, 1 measure. Okay, although I guess you could do a dependent. You could take, like, I guess you could look at the 2 scales as your 2 measures. So you could see if there's a difference between those 2 measures in the whole group, or just among women, or just among men. So you could maybe run a dependent t-test if you wanted to see that. Okay, but you're going to state that in your methods section. So once you know what your hypothesis is, that's going to tell you what inferential test do I need to run. This is one of the hardest things for researchers to do. They'll set out a hypothesis, and then sometimes they pick the wrong inferential test. You know, they'll say they're looking for differences, but then they'll do a correlation. Well, they did the wrong test. Okay, you have to do the right test. If you're looking for an effect or differences, that's always going to be a t-test or an ANOVA. If you're looking for relationships, that's always going to be a correlation. If you're looking for relationships prediction, that's going to be regression, correlation. Okay, so you have to know what test to run. If you run the wrong test, you're going to get points taken off. Okay, because you got to run the right test. Okay, so you're going to state that in your methods. Okay, then you're going to go ahead and run that inferential test. You're going to run the correlation or the regression or the t-test or the ANOVA. Okay, so you're going to run an inferential test. So then in your results section, you're going to describe the results of your research question, right? So you're going to tell me about the results. Okay, you're going to provide the mean and the standard deviation for each of your variables. Okay, so remember, those are just descriptive statistics. That's just the mean of the variables. Okay, so for instance, we found a significant increase in 1 rep max bench press in the creatine group following the strength training. Okay, so they did a t-test. They did a t-test. Their t-value was 2.5. Their p-value was 0.0003. So that means that there was a statistically significant difference from pre to post. So this is the pre-mean with the error, plus or minus 2 times the standard deviation. Here's the post mean with the error, plus or minus the 2 times the standard deviation. Okay, this is the descriptive statistics, but this is the inferential statistics right here, the t value with the probability. Okay, so these are just a descriptive. So if all you gave me was this and you didn't run a t-test, you would lose tons of points, okay? Because you can't really say anything. I can just look at this and say, hey, 288 is higher than 275. Okay, it's higher. No, I can't just guess. I can't just hope. I have to run an inferential test. I have to run the t-test and see that, oh, the probability tells me that, yes, these two are actually different. Okay, but if you don't run the t-test, you don't know. You can't calculate that based on the number in the sample. You can't just calculate that in your head. You have to actually calculate it with the t-test, with the inferential test to get the inferential statistic of the t-value. And then that generates a probability. Okay, that's the only way you can make the decision of whether they're different or not. Okay, so once I can make the decision whether they're different or not, or whether they're related or not. So let's say I decided I just wanted to look at relationships. Let's say I did a correlation. You know, I wanted to see if there was a relationship between these two variables. Or I wanted to see if there was a relationship in age. As people age, do they become more permissive or less permissive sexually? Like maybe I think, hey, there's going to be a indirect correlation with age. I can guess that as people age, they become less permissive sexually. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe they directly correlate. As they age, they become more permissive in their attitudes. Okay, but I could then I have to do a statistical test on that, a correlation. Then I would list my Spearman R here. What's my Spearman R? What's the correlation between those? And then I would really love, if somebody's going to do a correlation, I'd love to see them do the regression just so I can see it. They could run the regression on that and then say, hey, was that a statistically significant relationship, but how much error is there? Even though it's statistically significant, let's say the correlation's only 0.6, it's kind of low, or 0.4, kind of low. It could still be statistically significant, but there's going to be tons of error. You know, when you look at that standard error, it's going to be really big. So then you're going to say, I'm not really confident enough to use this prediction equation. I don't think this will do a good job of predicting. Even though it was a significant correlation, there's too much error. I would have liked to seen a correlation above 0.7. So those are things you would say in your discussion, right? In your discussion, you would discuss your results. You know, the data showed a correlation of 0.5, which is fairly weak. The regression showed it was a significant correlation, but the standard error is very high. I would not use this for the prediction equation. I don't think I'm not confident in this being, you know, a good prediction equation because the correlation wasn't above 0.7. Okay, I could state that in my discussion. And then I could go back and say, answer my hypothesis. If I said there was going to be a direct relationship between age and sexual permissiveness, then I could go back and say, even though there was a 0.5 correlation and it showed statistical significance, I'm accepting my hypothesis for the relationship, but I'm rejecting it for being able to predict sexual permissiveness. Too much error. Okay, so your discussion gives you the opportunity to say whether you accept or reject, and then what your recommendations are. Okay, so like for the case of this example, on this data, the inferential test of the t-test was run. The probability showed that there was a significant difference. And so if I go back to my hypothesis was that creatine will improve the 1 rep max bench press. So was that a 1-tail test or a 2-tail test? Anyone?
1?
Yes, very good, Rachel. That's a 1-tail test because it's directional, it's alternative. It's saying, I'm hypothesizing that creatine will increase the strength. So I'm putting all that error, all of that's going to be just on the positive side of the normal curve. So it's a 1-tail test. If this would have said, our hypothesis or the hypothesis is that creatine will show no improvement in the 1 rep max bench press performance, that would be a null hypothesis, and then you'd look at the 2-tail test when you look at the 2-tail results. Okay, but this is a 1-tailed. Okay, based on some of the research that people already, the researchers saw in the field, they saw some of the research out there. They said, you know, creatine tends to show some impact, so we're going to say we think it's going to increase. So they would look at the 1-tailed test results. Okay, so then in the results, they've got their 2 mean bench presses with the standard deviation times 2. So this is showing the range. So I could subtract 20 from this side. I could add 20 from this side. Okay, quite a bit of error. But it shows that it's statistically different. So I'm going to say I accept my hypothesis. Creatine did significantly increase 1 rep max bench press in football players. Okay, so that would be my my outcome. And if I saw other studies that showed the same thing, I can reference them in my discussion. That's another place you might do a reference. So if you saw a study that had similar results, they also saw a relationship between age and sexual permissiveness, you would cite that study, okay? Because that shows you're adding to the literature, you're adding to the strength of that outcome. If one study saw a significant positive correlation between age and sexual permissiveness, and now yours did too, you would cite that study. That then shows strength. because in order for us to really know that relationship is true, that those variables do vary the same, we'd want to see several studies, right? In order to say, again, it's not causation, but it's saying that there is a relationship there. Okay, so if you see other studies that have the same outcomes that you had, then you would cite their that research right here in the discussion. Okay, so as you review the research this weekend, you might see some possible hypotheses as you're looking at that brief sexual values inventory. If you're looking at other things about sexuality education, like how maybe it decreased the number of sexual partners, or it decreased teen pregnancies, or whatever, then you could cite that research. Okay, you could say, oh, people that get sexuality education, they tend to have better attitudes about birth control and barrier protection, right? Or the people that, if we look at differences, the people that did the education, they had higher scores on that on the attitudinal scale, which for the contraception and the barrier contraception, the higher the score, the more they would have the attitude to use birth control and barrier protection. For the sexual permissiveness, the higher their score, the more permissive they are. The lower the score, the less permissive they are. Okay, and then on the birth control and barrier protection, the higher their score, the more they think it's important, right? And it's a responsibility. The lower the score, the less they think it's important. Okay, so that's how those outcomes are going to be. So you could then cite research, other research that found the same thing. Okay. And then in the conclusion, that's actually where you state whether you accept or reject your hypothesis. Okay, then you list your references, and you need to have some references to get those points. Okay, questions about that before I move back?
I have a question.
Yes, Rachel.
So when you were saying that in the discussion section, like if we find an article that helps, I guess, prove our hypothesis, we put it in there. So we would just say that so-and-so's article on whatever the title was, I guess.
Had similar results.
Okay.
Right.
And
It also demonstrated this. Right. So I do want you guys to use APA formatting. So in APA formatting, that's where you would, in the parentheses, put the author's last name, comma, the year. Okay. And then you list in the references, you list in alphabetical order. Okay. But of course, it's so easy with the computer to be able to just have the article and then say you want it in APA format, so it's easy to get that into APA format. But when you cite in the report, you're going to use author's last name, year. And then if you do a direct quote, which you shouldn't do too many direct quotes, this is just a research report, but if you did a direct quote, then you would have to have the page number too. Okay. Okay, so let me bring up the rubric on the final project so you can look at that. So I can kind of go over that quick. Okay, so let me stop the share on the other thing, and let me start the share. Okay, so here's the rubric for the report. Okay, so you wanna look at this, because you're gonna be developing your report directly based on this rubric. Okay, this is what I use to grade the rubric. to grade the paper, okay? So I'm gonna look at your design. Okay, so if you have a very simplistic design, you'll probably get 7 to 8 points. If you have something that's a little bit more complicated, you might get 9 to 10 points, okay? So for instance, if you just do a correlation and you don't do the regression in the regression equation, you would get probably 7 or 8 points. But if you did the correlation and the regression, you would get more points. If you do a t-test, you'll get a t-test, maybe you do 2 t-tests, you would get more points versus just doing one simple t-test. Or if you did an ANOVA, you would get more points, okay? Because those are a little bit more complicated design. And you have to do the design correctly. So if you state a hypothesis and then you don't use the right test, even if you did the test right and you interpreted the test right, if it doesn't match your hypothesis, you didn't get the design right. Okay, so you've got to get the design. If you say relationship in your hypothesis, you're going to be using correlation and possibly regression. If you say differences or effect or higher or lower or something like that, you're going to be looking for differences. And so you're going to be using a t-test if you have 2 variables or 2 groups. You're going to be using ANOVA if you have 3 or more, okay? So I'm going to be looking at your research design and seeing if you can come up with a hypothesis and then test the hypothesis correctly, okay? That's your design, okay? And then how complicated is that? Your participation. So this was, did you post articles? Did you answer my emails about the survey? Did you contribute to the survey? Did you send the link out? Did you, that kind of thing. So if you did those things, you should get all the points. Okay. If I didn't get emails from you about the survey, or, you didn't contribute at all to the discussion about it or anything, you'll get less points. Okay. The title, 4 points for the title. So if you've got your variables and the population and they match up with your hypothesis and that matches up with the test you did, all of that has to match up, okay? If your title matches up with that, you'll get all the points, okay? Your introduction, this is where you say the purpose of your study, and does that match up with your title? And does that match up with your design, okay? So you've got to say, the purpose of my study is to look at relationships between these variables, blah, blah, blah. Or the purpose of my study is to see if there's a difference between these 2 groups on this variable, or, whatever. So you're going to be talking about your purpose, and then you're going to discuss those variables briefly. Discuss sexuality education. Discuss sexual knowledge. Discuss how age might affect people's attitudes. Discuss gender, how gender might affect people's attitudes on sexuality. Discuss whatever it is that you're pulling out. Discuss sexual permissiveness or the use of birth control, and so do a small discussion. Do a small introduction of those variables. Maybe do a couple of references where people could get more information. And then you're going to state your hypothesis. So the introduction is worth 8 points. So if I see this is the purpose of the study, a little bit of a few sentences about the variables with maybe some citations, and then the hypothesis. That's awesome. That's what should be in your introduction. Okay. The methods. Okay. You need to talk about the survey, what we had in the survey, how we developed the survey, the brief sexual attitudes survey that we got our 2 different scales from. Talk about, that we maybe not so great, but we're trying to determine whether they had 5 or more classes on sexuality education. So you would talk about the methodology here, and then what statistical inferential test you're going to do. A correlation, a regression, a t-test, a ANOVA, okay? And then your results. Results are worth a lot, okay? Did you run an inferential test? So you would have your descriptive statistics in there as well as your inferential outcome, your t-value and your probability, or your F ratio and your probability, or your Spearman R, Okay, you would put the error values in there. Okay, so did you get the results right? Okay, then you're going to have some discussion about that. So you're going to discuss the results. Okay, again, have some discussion around what those outcomes mean. Okay, and then you're going to make your conclusion. Did you accept or reject your hypothesis? So you got to get it right to get all the points, right? I got to be able to look at the title, the purpose, what statistical inferential test you ran. Did you get the right results? Did you interpret them correctly in the discussion? Like, what if you say, oh, there's no significant difference between men and women, and then I look and the probability is 0.0000812. Well, you interpreted that incorrectly. Maybe you ran the test right, but when you looked at the results, you interpreted it correctly. You said there was no difference. And based on the probability, we can say there is a difference. Okay, so you've got to interpret that right in the discussion and then get it right, whether you're going to accept or reject your hypothesis. And remember, all of those things should be connected. You know, if you're just looking at a couple of variables, you don't even need to talk about the other variables, except in the methodology. In the methodology, we talk about this is what we collected, but this is what we're testing with the inferential test. So if I'm testing the difference between permissiveness in men and women, then I don't need to talk about birth control and barrier protection in the results, because I never tested them. Okay, I didn't do any kind of inferential test on them. Okay, all I would have is some descriptive statistics. Okay, and then I would have my references, and I give you an example of what APA is. Okay, so here's the example right here. You can just click on it. It takes you to some examples of APA referencing. In order to get full points, you need at least 4 to 5 references. Okay, if you have 2 to 3, you'll get less points. If you have no references, if you have no references, you'll get 0 in that area. And then, did you use the right format? Did you, so your format, your grammar, you know, your writing, all of that, that's worth 12 points. So it's a total of 80 points for the project. This is what I'll grade it off. So you want to use this. You want to actually use these things. You would want to say introduction, underline it as your heading, and then do your introduction. Methods, results, discussion, conclusions, references. Okay, so this is found on the 4th module under the final project. Okay, so I'm also going to show you an example. Okay, so let me share that. Okay, so here's an example. So this is what the cover page would look like. You would have basically your variables up here, your name. So in the running head, you would have like a basic overview of your title. You could put your right research, you know, EXHP 343 research and statistics, your title, your name, the date. Okay, you can put the page number at the bottom. Okay, then height, weight, and BMI among exercise, science, and health promotion students. So the variables and the population. Okay, then I've got a little introduction. Purpose of the study was to measure height, weight, BMI in college students by gender to determine if students fall into healthy category for mean BMI and mean weight at their mean height, and examine possible differences in mean BMI by gender. Okay, so then I go through and I talk about body mass index a little bit, talk about obesity, weight. So I've got 2 hypotheses. So this is a little bit more complex design. The first hypothesis was that EXHP students would fall into healthy categories for both mean BMI and mean weight at their mean height. The second hypothesis was that male students would have a higher mean BMI than female students. Okay, so then I do a little talk about the methodology, exactly what was done. I've got the results here with their means, mean BMI, heights. I've got the error in there, plus or minus. This is 2 times the standard deviation. I've got my N, my number of N, and then I've got my inferential statistic, because my second hypothesis was asking if there's a difference between men and women, and I found that there was no difference, no significant difference. Here's my t-value. My probability was 0.69, which is much higher than 0.05, so there was no difference between the genders. Okay, so then I talk a little bit about that. Both gender groups appeared to be overweight for their height, but they fell into healthy categories for BMI. And then I talk about some other research. They found a high proportion of college students fell into unhealthy categories for BMI. This might be due to the fact that our sample came from exercise science students, so they tend to be more fit, okay? In the discussion, this is where you might talk about the confounding variables. The fact that, you know, we're limited on the number of questions we asked about their sexuality education experience. We could put, you know, we could put any kind of confounding variables we have in here, okay? That might have created error, or that might have not helped, not how to see the outcomes. The other thing that I might say about this is that our N was really small, right? Remember, we want 15 to 30 in each group, and this only had 6 and 11. So that's another thing that you could say right here. The lack of a significant difference in BMI in our group might reflect the low statistical power associated with low subject numbers and considerable inter-individual variability found in the study. So we have low power in this because we had such a low sample size. So I have to state that right in my discussion. Maybe the reason I didn't pick up a difference is because I had such low power, right? My beta was low. I have poor external validity here, very low sample size. I would just state that, okay? It's important to just state where your limitations are, what confounding variables might be in place. So we conclude that EXHPR students are on average overweight, but they fell into healthy categories for BMI in both genders, okay? And that they have no significant difference in BMI between the genders, okay? Then I would list my, my references. And this gives you an idea about what APA looks like. It's the author, their first initials, the year, then the name of the article, the name of the journal, the volume if there is one, and the page numbers. So that's what, that's basically what that looks like for. So this example is also posted on module 4 under the final project tab. There's like a little link for the final project. So there's the rubric and the sample lab. Okay, so I'm looking for something, you know, probably be around 3 pages. You can put in tables. It's kind of nice to have a little table that shows your descriptive statistics with the errors on them. If you wanted to put a little table, if you wanted to like extend this and also put your inferential statistics, you could do that, or you could just state that in text. But I have to see a Spearman R or an F ratio or a T value in probabilities. Okay, we've got to see that, or you're not going to get all the points in that results section, and then you will not get points in the conclusion either, because you can't make any conclusions unless you run an inferential test. You just can't make any conclusions. Okay, so you've got to run an inferential test. Questions about the lab report and what would be required for the lab report? Okay, so if anything comes up, please contact me. Before we meet again on Monday, you need to get lecture 7, homework and quiz, lecture 8, or not lecture 8, but homework 8 off of that, off of the discussion we had on reliability and validity. Okay, test, retest reliability, and then the validity using the gold standard and the substandard test. Okay, so you've got to, and the quiz associated with that. So you've got to get those done. So 7 is due by the end of the day today. 8 is due by the end of the day tomorrow. Okay, you need to get your journal done. Okay, so you should be writing these down so you don't forget. Got to get your journal done by the end of the day tomorrow. And then by Sunday, that extra credit for the midterm. This weekend, if I were you, I would start working on my paper, start thinking about possible hypotheses, start studying for the final. Okay, so today if you haven't done 7 yet, please prepare. Okay, tomorrow, please prepare for 8. Go through the practice homework. Go rewatch that lecture that I just posted from yesterday. Okay. And then on Monday, we'll talk more about different hypotheses, probabilities, and I want you to come up with some so we can have a discussion. Okay. We'll talk about that. And then I think I probably will do like a little talk about the areas that were missed on the midterm. I think I'll do that on Monday. Okay, Tuesday and Wednesday, no formal meeting. Work on your paper unless you have questions. If you have questions, reach out. I will be available all day. I will be checking my email. Please reach out if you have questions. I'll be willing to do a Zoom with you. But here's the thing, I can't, like if you say, well, this is my hypothesis, what test would I use? I can't tell you that. That's part of it. You know, I can kind of have some discussion with you. I can ask you some questions to get you thinking, but I'm not going to just tell you what test to use. That's part of you being able to show that you learn the material. Okay, but I'm happy to like bounce that around with you. Okay. And then Thursday we'll meet again. So I'll stay on if anybody has individual questions. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on Monday at 10:30 or answering any questions between now and then for you. Have a wonderful day and a great weekend. Rachel, did you have a question?
No, I've clicked the wrong button.
Oh, no problem. Courtney, do you have a question?
I was wondering if you'd have time to discuss, like, it's not like pertaining to this class, it's more along the lines of getting registered for the fall.
Sure. Let me see if Adriana has a question about this class, and then we can talk.
Okay.
Adriana, are you still there? Sometimes people just turn their thing on and then they leave, which seems a little strange to me because I'm like, I mean, there are people, I mean, there's no judgment if people come or not to the lecture. So I'm not sure why people do that. So, okay. So you're looking at your registration for fall?
Yes.
Okay. So did you have questions or did you just need help with advising? Or?
Yeah, I had a couple, because, well, I guess just as long as that, I had questions as far as getting into like the nursing classes specifically, because I didn't know, I just finished up the last prereq for the health science degree and for nursing. So I don't know, and I took that through PCC, so I don't know how I'm supposed, like, I obviously have them send that over to the school, but I know I probably will have to get approved for the nursing class, if I'm thinking correctly, or should I just be able to enroll into that?
Yeah, so what class were you thinking about taking?
Let me
I
see.
don't think there's a lot of classes in the fall for the
Yeah.
health science students.
There's only 2. It would be the pharmacology and global public health.
Okay, so you cannot take global public health until you have 351.
Okay.
But you can take the pharm class.
Okay.
It's probably one of the harder nursing classes. And sometimes I encourage people to try to get 302 first, but are you going to be applying in October for next May?
Yes. Or yeah, is it next May that starts?
Yeah,
For
so
the-
you'll be, are you going to be graduating with health science that this next May in 21?
Yes.
Okay, so you're going to be applying in October for the accelerated program. So if you take pharm, you can take pharm this fall. We just need to make sure that you have all of the prerequisites with a C or better. So you have all of those?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to make a note for myself just to check those. And then, but you can go ahead and get registered into pharmacology.
Okay.
And you need to also email Dr. DePalma, Ruth DePalma,
Okay.
and let her know that you're a health science student, you have all your prerequisites, and you're enrolling in pharmacology.
Okay.
Okay, and then in the spring, you'll be able to take like 302 and 351, and like 331 and 371 will all be offered in the spring.
Okay. Yeah. I've
So
seen those ones.
you could take those.
Okay. Because I also had a question. Well, you answered my question about like when to get registered for the actual nursing program. But then I also had a question as far as because I'm needing, I think, let me see what I calculated. So for the courses outside the major, which are 20 hours, I do have 8 of those, or well, I have 9 now. With because my patho at PCC was 4 credit hours, and I believe you said that would transfer over, and then one of those credit hours would just be considered an extra outside.
Yes,
Okay.
that's
And then,
correct.
well, I wasn't sure though too, because I was wanting to do phlebotomy at PCC.
Sure.
So will that count towards those courses outside? Because it's 11 credit hours there.
Yeah, you have to petition those. So they're not just automatically transferred in, but you
Okay.
can do a petition for them.
Okay.
Hang on, I want to pull your degree audit up just to kind of see if, so have you already sent the pathophysiology class over?
No, I had just finished that.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay, so what's your PID?
571988.
Okay, hang on just a second. I'm running a degree audit on you.
Okay.
Okay, so hang on, I'm just kind of looking through. Okay. Okay, great. Very good. Your GPA is good for your accelerated. What did you get in pathophysiology?
I'm still waiting on that to finalize. She said it'll be finalized by Friday. I think I'm gonna double check today to see. But then I'll call PCC and have them transfer that over. But it should be either a high B or a low A.
Okay, so you're going to be great for your, for your GPA. The other thing, Courtney, is you have these CNA classes.
Yeah.
So we should try to petition those.
Okay.
So you should try to do a petition for those and try to get those in, and we can use those as electives.
Okay. How exactly am I supposed to go about
So
doing
there's a petition. Let me see if I can just find it for you really quick. There's a petition that you can do for classes that were not initially accepted. Let me see if I can just find that petition.
Okay.
Okay, so there's a petition. It's called the Petition for Approval of Transfer Credits. And these are credits that were not, it has several things for you to choose from. Let me actually just show it to you, and then I'll send you the link for it.
Mm-hmm.
But let me show it to you real quick. Okay, can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so petition for approval of transfer credits. So you would click this one right here. Credits not initially accepted in transfer. Okay, so it says the evaluator was not able to determine the transferability of this course. Okay, you'll need to attach course syllabi or like course descriptions for those classes. Okay, and then you'll give them to me.
Okay.
And then I can relate them back to, I'll probably just relate them back to some kind of like elective, or just, they're not going to have a direct equivalent. I'm just going to say that these are going to be accepted as electives.
Okay.
Okay, so and then I would sign here. Okay, so I'm going to send you the link for this, and then if you fill that out, then and get me the course descriptions, then we can turn it in and try to get you those credits. About how many credits do you think that is?
For the CNA? That was one question I was going to ask you after you had finished with that, because I don't exactly know.
Well, you'd have to go look on your transcripts.
Okay, I can do that real quick.
Yeah, so if you look on your transcripts, you'd be able to see how many credit hours those courses that didn't get accepted. So let me go back to your audit. Yeah, so it was like, these were all from OJC.
Yeah.
It was the NUA 101, the NUA 102, and the NUA 170.
Let's see. So would they show on my would they show on my CSUP transcript or
No, because they didn't get accepted.
okay, okay.
So I can see them on your audit where it just says no transfer, and I can see what the classes are, but you're gonna have to go back and look at your OJC transcripts.
Okay, I'll have to figure out how to pull those up then.
Yeah, so you'll have to get those,
Okay.
and you'll have to look at the number of credits, and then you'll have to go to OJC, and maybe you could probably email somebody from that program and see if you could get syllabi for those 3 classes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, but it's worth it because we'll be able to petition those credits, and then that's fewer credits you have to take here.
Yeah, that's what I was like trying to figure out with as far as the
Yeah, the hours outside the electives.
I was wanting to like take phlebotomy, but I wanted to use that because I'll be doing the internship in the spring and then the phlebotomy also in the spring, and they're pretty heavy weighted credit hours. So I figured just having those 2 classes plus a couple other nursing classes would be okay, but I'm just trying to figure out what all I have left I need to do.
Yeah, and we can talk about it, but honestly, I mean, even though phlebotomy is a really great thing to do, you might be better off taking more of the nursing classes.
Yeah.
Because that's going to directly, lighten your load in the accelerated program.
Yeah.
So, one thing you might want to think about, like, what were you thinking about for your internship?
I'm probably going I want to see if Parkview will let me go into their OB department, but if not, I'm working as a CNA over there, so it'd probably just be along the lines of using that.
Yeah, so, and maybe you could get a CNA, get in there. The other thing you could do is, there are shorter phlebotomy programs. You could go get certified at phlebotomy and then do your internship. You could be doing, some phlebotomy stuff as part of your hours.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That would work too, like taking a class in phlebotomy, and then that'd be used for my internship as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
So if you just went somewhere where you could get the phlebotomy a lot faster and easier, right? Instead of taking a whole semester long class,
yeah,
do that. And then we could use those as part of your internship.
Okay. And do you know of anywhere that I could like do that? Like,
yeah, I don't know if IntelliTech might have something.
Okay.
You just have to get online and just Google phlebotomy training.
Okay.
There are some that you can just get like in 2 weekends.
Okay.
The other thing is, since you work at Parkview, you might want to reach out to them. They have some training programs at Parkview.
Okay. Yeah.
And so you could reach out to them and say like, hey, I really want to get certified in phlebotomy. Is there any way I could get, you get involved in your program here? Because I know they have training programs at hospitals also that are quick. I mean, like that you can get just pretty quick. And then, that might even lead to working as a phlebotomist partially, or, because it'd be nice for you to get something different than CNA experience since you already have CNA experience.
Yeah.
It'd be great if you could maybe do some phlebotomy in addition.
Yeah.
So I would start investigating that now. I mean, and that might be something you could even do over the Christmas break, and then you'd have that done. I'd allow you to use the hours towards your internship, but then you could have it done, and then you wouldn't have that on top of your internship.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Right, and then you could just try to take some nursing classes next semester.
Yeah, that definitely help a lot. So if I'm understanding correctly, I do that during the Christmas break, and then that'll be used for my internship.
Yeah. So, what you need to do is find some kind of program, and I would look now. I mean, even if you could get it done this semester, then I would just have you keep track of the hours you spent, and then you could use those hours towards your 400 hours in the internship.
Okay, so would that completely take care of the internship, or would I have to
No,
do? No,
no.
okay.
I mean, getting those phlebotomy certificates, I mean, it might be 30 hours.
Oh, okay. So
You
okay,
know
the
what I'm
400.
saying? So,
Yeah.
but you could use that towards your internship. I mean, the internship is 400 clock hours.
Okay. Okay.
So it's going to take you, you know, most of the semester to do.
Okay. So
But I would allow you, while you're doing the training program, I would allow you to use those hours, you know,
okay.
because you're getting that training program and you're getting certified. So I'd allow you to use those clock hours
Okay.
towards your 400 clock hours.
Okay. So would it have to just be so I could use various things. So I could use like my CNA and the phlebotomy?
Sure.
Okay. I just was
Especially if you're going to be working at Parkview. I mean, maybe they'll let you work part-time doing phlebotomy and part-time CNA, or, you know, just see what's out there and what's available for you. I just want you to be able to get the most experiences that you can.
yeah, because I definitely want to I did an internship in high school at the OB department because that's specifically what I want to go into.
Right?
So I guess it'd be kind of like a cross between like my actual CNA work and then hopefully the OB and then phlebotomy. If is that like I'm understanding correctly, I could use those like 3 things or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we don't want to have like 3 different sites. Um, like you could have 2 sites. We allow up to 2 sites. So you could be like
Okay.
doing CNA at one site and doing phlebotomy at another site, but I wouldn't want you at like 3 different sites.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I guess the only other question I had was as far as the Health Science 494, the field experience.
Uh-huh.
I do have I've got my hours for the pharmacy over, but I wasn't sure. I couldn't remember exactly. I went back through old emails, but I couldn't remember exactly what I'm supposed to do with those as far as for those 6 credit hours.
Oh, so you were going to do a prior learning assessment?
Yeah,
Okay.
for me to get because we had to mark down on my what is this? The kind of like overall like transcripts, I guess, and it had already marked down the 6 credit hours for that. But I know I was needing to send stuff over to you for that.
Right. So what experience were we going to use?
My pharmacy.
Okay. So what I have to have is I have to have you need to write me an email telling me about what you did in that experience.
Okay.
Okay. And then you have to have an email from a supervisor verifying that you spent at least 270 hours during that experience.
Okay.
Okay. So I have to have those 2 pieces of verification, and then I send that in, and then they apply the credit.
Okay. All right. And I think that's it. That touched base with everything that I was needing. So I
Okay,
just want to make
perfect.
sure for this next year because I know I'm going to be kind of scrambling to try to get the degree finished, but I should be able to get it done.
Okay, that sounds awesome. Well, just reach out to me if you have any other questions. And I sent you the link for that form.
Okay.
And so you need to work on the prior learning assessment and the getting those done. You know, like once this class ends, then I would try to, before school starts, I try to get those things done.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
Okay?
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, you bet.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.